Welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 173rd edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 627th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 11th, 2020. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud Banner Moments.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Tuesday when Nick Baumgart tweeted out a useful update on one of Indiana's incoming freshmen. Baumgart tweeted, quote, IU freshman Trey Galloway is on campus and tells me his, quote, wrist is doing great. That's a quote from Galloway. Originally injured 2 years ago, he re-injured it early last season. He'd never use it as an excuse, but it bothered him more than he'd lead on. No plans to redshirt. I expect an impact freshman season. End of tweet. Now, there's a lot going on here. First, it's no surprise that there are no plans to redshirt Galloway, especially with Justin Smith gone. Trey's size, toughness, versatility, and defensive maturity will make him an interesting chess piece for Archie Miller to deploy depending on matchups. But more importantly, the update on Trey's wrist is very important. Perhaps the biggest swing skill of all of Indiana's incoming recruits is Trey Galloway's ability to shoot. It was probably the difference between him being a top 100 player, maybe even a top 75 player, and where he ended up at number 138. Because Trey can do pretty much everything else well and will surely surprise many IU fans with his athleticism. But when you look at his stats, the shooting numbers stand out in a big way. He shot just 25% from three on 201 attempts as a junior and senior, and he shot just 58% from the free throw line on 272 attempts. Those numbers are bad, especially for high school. And in this day and age of college hoops, it's really hard to play a guy on the wing who shoots the ball that poorly. But if you talk to anyone with an intimate knowledge of Trey's development and his game, they'll tell you that those shooting numbers are deceiving. The wrist injury really had an impact, and if you look deeper at the numbers, there is definite evidence to support those people. As a freshman and sophomore, prior to the wrist injury, Trey shot 36.6% from three on 194 attempts, and he shot 71% from the free throw line on 190 attempts. Now that's more like it. So, what do you think is more likely? That a hardworking coach's son who improved each season in almost every statistical category all of a sudden went from being good to being bad at the most important skill in the game? Or that the hardworking coach's son's shooting struggles really were affected by the wrist injury, and if healthy, he'll at least be a passable shooter as early as next season? I'd be betting my money on the latter and hoping that the wrist issue won't be one that nags him as a Hoosier. And if Trey Galloway is at least passable as a shooter, then I echo how Nick Baumgart ended his tweet. Trey will be impacting winning as soon as next season, and certainly beyond. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left.
You'll have fun. The Hoosiers make the tourney again. Fun. Yes, you'll have fun. The Hoosiers make the tourney again. Fun.
San Diego chicken.
Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Well, I mean, I don't know that you need to tell people that it's really hard to play a guy on the wing who doesn't shoot the three well that are listening to this podcast. But that's neither here nor there.
Just thought I'd state the obvious.
Okay. Well, from a non-basketball perspective, liked seeing a lot of the shots from the protests that took place in Bloomington. I think it was last Friday. Just was awesome to see the city come together. Talked about how some of the businesses were really supportive around there. Saw Tom Allen, the football team, get involved. That was obviously good to see. From a basketball perspective, I'm kind of catching up on some of these other podcasts and got to listen to the Hoosier Hysterics interview with Mike Roberts and really enjoyed that. So I'm sure Coach is maybe listening to it right now.
I have a mad crush on Coach Roberts.
And so, no, just excited to have him with the program, and good to hear these guys' thoughts. I've not listened to the Bruiser Flint one yet, but really enjoyed the Mike Roberts one, and hearing his excitement for the team and everything that's going on with the program makes you excited and hopeful for things to get back up and running.
All right, and to my right, no, it is not Ryan Phillips or the coach, Brian Tonsoni. They each have the week off, but here with us, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Crimson Cast, it is Scott Caulfield.
Coverdale's like a real early James Harden.
Yes, he is. Scott, what is on your mind this week as it relates to IU basketball?
I mean, that's the greatest comp from 2002 IU basketball out there.
Keep
First off, I'm
using it.
sorry. I know. Please do. I stand by it. I'll gladly talk to anybody. I feel bad for people who are like, oh, the Crimson Cast music. I can't wait to hear Galen. Like, bummer. So the NBA announced that they are going to have the bubble tournament in Orlando. I'll ask you guys, if the Big Ten was going to come back and finish the Big Ten tournament, where do you think they should play their bubble tournament? I mean, my vote would be the Hyper, like the old school 6-court Hyper. But unfortunately, knowing the Big Ten, they probably do it in New York to get the Rutgers crowd there, or something like that. But where would you play the Big Ten bubble tournament?
I mean, you play it in Indianapolis, and you don't even think twice about it. That's the best place. You figure out how to make it work in Indianapolis. It's the best place for an amateur sporting event. It's the best place for a Big Ten event. Final answer.
I agree.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, Indianapolis for selfish reasons. Now, you said the Hyper. I thought maybe you're trying to think of some kind of multi-court facility that we could...
I mean, the Hyper would be awesome, just to see Big Ten teams play in that kind of situation.
There's a lot of cool high school gyms in Indiana that you could do it at if you weren't going to have fans in it. I mean, you'd have not that some of the high school gyms in Indiana aren't big enough to hold a fair number, but there's some cool historical places that you could try to do it in that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, you could play it in the gym they filmed Hoosiers at. Like, you can rent that place out. Like, that would be great. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking about. Is I wish we could finish the Big Ten tournament that we started. The only problem with Indianapolis is that's where the COVID, that's kind of there's a bad memory of it happening there, and so like I said, the Big Ten would probably do it in Madison Square Garden for
Fred
doing the
Hoiberg's
Big Ten
already,
New Jersey.
Hoiberg's if we're picking up where the tournament left off, Hoiberg has already been eliminated, so he wouldn't be back looking anyway.
Oh boy. Oh, happy memories, that Big Ten tournament. Happy memories. I mean, at least Indiana played well, so it is at least happy memories of one time that we played well in the Big Ten tournament. So we'll, I guess, take that and move on. All right, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We've got a few Hoosier headlines, including an interesting new name on the recruiting radar that we'll talk about. Then it's time for our Rob Phinisee player preview, and then we will get to your questions as we always do in our third segment. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all of that, a few quick announcements. Please continue to support our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Go to homefieldapparel.com. You can use the promo code Assembly20 at any time to get 20% off. I know those guys, if you follow them on Twitter, they have lots of deals that come up. They'll have 25% flash sales, 30% flash sales sometimes. But that trusty promo code Assembly20 lets them know that we sent you there. And we actually get a little cut of that too. So that is helpful. But yeah, that'll always get you 20% off no matter what. And Scott is wearing one of their shirts right now, I see. Scott has the Watford for the win shirt on, one of the two Watford shirts that they have. Andy's wearing the Script Indiana t-shirt. I just have my old boring, Indiana. I know. I should have worn my Home Field Apparel. I didn't get the memo. But, that leads us right into our IU headlines, Scott, because going on right now, concurrently with the live broadcast of our show, is the Big Ten Network broadcast of The Big Moment, which is a new show that they're doing, I guess, getting the backstory on lots of big moments in Big Ten history. And I don't know if this is the debut of that show, but it is the Christian Watford episode. So talking about the shot, I know Christian and Verdell Jones are interviewed. So if you're here watching live and you're just finding out about that and you want to pop off and go watch that, we will not take it seriously. Scott, now that he just found out about it, may leave right now. We're not sure, but we totally understand. But that show should be really, really cool. As many angles as we can learn more about that great moment. That'll be fun. So that's certainly something to watch or catch up on. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Scott, obviously you're hearing about it for the first time, but pretty cool idea I think, by the Big Ten Network.
I love it. I mean, I got to say, I think the Big Ten, the Big Ten Network has done a great job. Like, the journey for basketball, the journey for football have been really great series. And so I'm excited for that. They've done some really good stuff. So honestly, when you said that I hadn't heard it, I'm excited to watch that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I finally had a chance over the weekend to catch up and watch the soccer one that they did on Jerry Yeagley. I think Worth the Wait it was called. It was really, really good as well. So forward to seeing the Watford one as well.
Yeah, and they showed Not Pictured about Bill Torfey, which was great to see. So who wasn't pictured
that
in the
was
night
earlier tonight. I think that was on. Yeah,
that whole story. So Lots of good stuff going on BTN. It was actually an Indiana takeover today, so pretty cool there. But I want to talk with you guys about this because I thought this was the most interesting headline. This is really one of the first weeks that we haven't had, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but no real big news about, when teams are coming back and that kind of stuff. Like we kind of found out some stuff last week and we're kind of just now waiting to see if we hit all those dates and what the pro leagues end up doing. But the big piece of news that hit my radar, and this came from Corey Evans, who writes for Rivals, who covers recruiting for Rivals, and did a good episode of Podcast on the Brink. I wasn't on it this week, but he talked with Alex Bozich. But there's a guy from Illinois. His name is Brandon Lieb, and he is currently not ranked. He was originally in the class of 2021, but he's a 7-foot big man. He's on track to classify in 2020. And I will say, I think I saw this on Mike Schumann's site at first. And so I saw the name, so I just decided to pop over and look at some highlights of this guy. And this is before reading what Corey Evans had to say about him. And I was pretty impressed because sometimes you hear about these guys who are not ranked, these 7-footers, and we think of the whole parade of guys that Tom Crean brought in that, God love them. They just didn't have a whole bunch of skill that you could see even from when they were recruited that would translate to the major college level. But I watched this guy play, and I don't know exactly how great the competition was, but he does play on a good AAU team. But he was relatively mobile, had a good-looking shot, looked pretty good. And so when I went back and read what Corey Evans said about him, he said, I watched his highlights over the weekend. I have to say I was heavily impressed. He is not just some plodding big man that can't move or score outside of 5 feet from the basket. Sure, he is at his best near the goal and is a reliable drop-off scorer, weak-side putback finisher. However, he can convert over either shoulder in the post, runs the floor with a purpose, and can hit difficult pick-and-pop or trail jumpers to the perimeter. Andy, no word on what his turnaround jump shot looks like. But other than that, some good words from Corey Evans. And so the reason why this is interesting from an Indiana perspective is that, offers are flowing in for this guy. He had him from Bucknell and the Illinois States of the world, but now he's starting to get interest from Indiana and Iowa and Oklahoma and Penn State and Providence, Seton Hall, some bigger schools. And this is the kind of guy who might have blown up on the summer recruiting scene if you had it. That's one of the downsides of not having the summer recruiting is guys like this who are off the radar can't play enough to impress you. And so when you look at what Indiana has, where this year, you've got Joey Brunk, you've got Trace Jackson-Davis, and you've got Race Thompson. You're for sure going to lose Joey Brunk. You're probably going to lose Trace before next year. So you basically will enter next year with Race Thompson and Logan Duncombe, and then in 2023, you just have Logan Duncombe among guys on the roster right now. Getting a guy like this who might potentially come in and redshirt for a year instead of go to prep school, which is what he was thinking about doing, with 2 open scholarships is a pretty attractive thing for me. So this is kind of the first thing that I've really seen in terms of how we might use one of those 2 extra scholarships that I'm pretty excited about and think would be a really good way to use them. Andy, have you had a chance to learn anything about this guy? What are your thoughts on that use of the scholarship?
Yeah, I have not. I think conceptually, I can see that makes sense. You wouldn't necessarily, I think everybody's talked about who are you going to add because you've already got what you feel like is a pretty deep team now. So this answers that question, I think becomes attractive maybe for the same reason as we've talked about, like a sit-out transfer. Maybe that's somebody. The front court is obviously, as you project forward, looks like it will be a need. So I think there's definite upside if you think he can play at this level and get him a year in the system, in the weight program, get him conditioned correctly. I think most people hear big guys. I think the first question people would have defensively now is he going to be able to play ball screens the way that IU wants to do it and things like that. So I certainly don't know enough to speculate on something like that. But if you think you could use that and mold him into something, then it might be worth a look.
Scott, what are your thoughts on it? Just the general idea.
Yeah, no, I like Andy's conceptualization. I like it. When you do talk about the parade of Korean big men, I'm still waiting for the Guy Marc Michel NBA debut I was promised. So I'm looking forward to that this fall in the bubble in Orlando. I mean, here's the thing: is when I look at Archie Miller, that on the court we can have some discussions, but I think I can agree, and a lot of other people should too. On the recruiting side, he's done everything that I want an IU coach to do. He's recruiting kids from the Midwest, kids from Indiana. We got 4, Mr. Basketballs in a row from the state of Indiana. He's recruiting from the area and then kind of going for 1 or 2 guys outside of it. So in this case, everything if this was under the Crean era, it's kind of like, okay, here we go again. Like, here's another 7-footer is going to be, next Shaq. Okay, roll your eyes. But in this case, I give Archie a lot of the benefit of the doubt. He's recruited a lot of very solid players. He's recruited well for what the program needs and what he's looking to do. And so, in this case, I'm definitely not the guy who's going to know and watch, tape on kids who are in high school and see that. I kind of wait for them to put on an IU jersey to start talking about them. That said, I give Archie a lot of leeway in this, is that I think he's going to bring in guys who can play his system and who can do what he wants to do. So to Andy's question, like, how's a guy like 7 foot going to play defense, play the pack line? Like, I think he could probably do it well, or else Archie wouldn't be recruiting.
Yeah. So, look, it's still really early, and we'll see if the interest picks up and all of that. But it is, to me, if you're going to, number one, Scott, I think that the point that you made is good. We can kind of trust Archie that he's not just going to talk, like, he's not dying to fill these 2 scholarships. He's going to fill them with someone that really deserves them, that he really believes he can develop, or that could come in and help the team next season. And so this is really kind of the first story like this I've seen with a guy who could potentially redshirt, and just given how the depth chart looks moving forward with big men, this to me would be an ideal way to do it, if it would work out like that. So anyway, don't know how likely it is, but it is definitely something to keep on your radar. Any other headlines that jumped out to you guys that you want to hit before we move on and start talking about Rob Phinisee?
No,
it wasn't a ton that went on this week.
Yeah, fairly slow week. Marc Michel, though, did average 7.7 points per game last year somewhere in France, in case you're wondering. So,
well,
on the
Scott,
road to that NBA debut, Scott.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Okay, coming up, we are going to look ahead to Rob Phinisee's junior season. His first 2 seasons have been a mix of big shots and tantalizing promise with injuries and lapses of ineffectiveness. Will he be ready to lead and lead consistently as an upperclassman? We're going to talk about that next. Stick with us.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Christian. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mobbers during one of our unedited live broadcasts, or watch those replays and see all of the between segment banter, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. All right, I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and our special guest, Scott Caulfield from Crimson Cast. And it is time, gentlemen, as we continue our series of off-season player previews, looking at guys as they head into next season, it's time to talk about Rob Phinisee. And, just in terms of an overview, I think when you kind of look at the numbers for Rob and what he's done through his career, some of them are impressive. His assist rate has been pretty good. His steal rate is pretty good. When you really dig into the numbers at Synergy, as a catch and shoot guy, like, he's really, really good. Like, in the excellent, like 90th percentile and higher. He's obviously a solid defender, really good at defending pick and rolls. But, I think it goes beyond the numbers with Rob and kind of our experience with Rob, because there are obviously the moments, the shot that he hit against Butler as a freshman, the way that he played those first 7-8 games where it was like, holy crap, this is the point guard of the future. This is a future all Big Ten player. And then the ups and downs after the injury, and everything that happened at the end of his freshman season. And then you come into the sophomore season and the hopes are really high, and then he gets injured before the season, and it really takes him a while to get going. And it felt like it was just kind of up and down all season until, toward the end of the year, he started to play a little bit better. The assist numbers were up. The steal numbers were up. And so it's just, it's been these ups and downs, Scott. And so I think now as we enter his junior year, and he's kind of the guy, I think you talk to a lot of IU fans, who's the most important player on this team? Obviously, Trace Jackson Davis is number one, but usually among the next 2 or 3 names mentioned, usually the next name mentioned is Rob Phinisee, because of what he can mean in terms of setting the pace for Archie's offense, getting the ball where it needs to go, and then as a defender, really spearheading that pack line defense. So I think it's one of those, we all want Rob to be so good. We believe that he can be because we've seen it, but yet the totality of the evidence in his 2 seasons is as much good as there is ineffective, because there have been games where he's kind of disappeared and not been there. And it makes him a really intriguing and even confusing guy to project forward for this season, because I think he's got all the tools to be an all Big Ten level point guard, but yet until we see it consistently on a night in, night out basis, it's kind of tough to believe it yet. So where do you stand on Rob in terms of your confidence level as him being the guy now as an upperclassman to lead this team to where it needs to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit a really interesting point with Rob. Like, it's so much more about the numbers, because when we knew we were going to talk about Phinisee tonight, like, my first thought is exactly what you said. Like, he's probably the second most important person on the team next year, because when he's playing well and he's kind of managing the offense, I feel very comfortable with him doing that. But then I started looking at the numbers, and, you know, the numbers kind of hit me in the face that, he took, he was 21% of all possessions last season. He had his hand on, which is third most on the team. He's right tied with Jackson Davis. Devontae Green had 27%. Shocker there. But, for that, he had the lowest offensive rating of anybody on the team with that much usage. Jackson Davis is 119 usage rate, offensive rating. Devontae Green's 98. He's at 94. You have guys like Al Durham or 108. Joey Brunk's 101. You look at this, and if you look just at the numbers, the first thing you would say is like, well, we got to get the ball out of Phinisee's hands more. Like, he can't be shooting as much. But to your point, when you're watching the games, when he's doing well, that's when I feel like our offense is clicking the best. So you go back also to the injury thing. Like, I feel, I always say this on our podcast, like, it's kind of no brainer stuff, but it's like, the crazy thing too is like, we're halfway done with his career. Like, we're halfway done. Like, this is, it's 50% done. Even though I feel like he's just got here, but something with his career is always going to be like that Butler game, his freshman year, where he hit that shot. And it's like, I felt just like you, though. I'm like, oh my God, we found our next point guard. Like, we have somebody who can steady the ship. And then immediately he gets injured. And I honestly feel like we haven't had kind of that long stretch since. Like, it's kind of, sputtered his freshman year. He battled with injury last year. Like, I feel bad because I don't feel like we've had that like 2 months of just I'm at full peak performance, Rob Phinisee yet.
Well, and Andy, that's the thing that makes Rob hard to project, because it's like, if you just had this guy who had accumulated these numbers, and his 2-point field goal percentage is under 40%, and he hasn't been that efficient. His turnover rate went up last year, which was actually part of the reason why his usage rate went up, is because he turned the ball over so much. I think if you hadn't had all those injuries, you would think, all right, well, this is kind of what this guy is. He's an okay point guard, but he's been below average in the Big Ten. But that's, I think, why there's a lot of hope. And I think a lot of legitimate hope is that when he's played poorly, it has felt like it's been coming off of injury, like he hasn't been able to get into a rhythm. Now, maybe he'll just be a guy that we look at the end of his career and it's like, man, he just never got healthy. We never feel like we saw what he can do. But it's like there's this nagging feeling among all IU fans, and I feel it too. Man, if we can just get a full season of health for this guy, like, this can be an above average to really good Big Ten point guard, especially as an upperclassman. And I think when you're looking at the most optimistic projections for Indiana this season, that is like got to be right there at the top of the projection list if that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's funny looking at some of the efficiency numbers. Like, I don't think I realized just how kind of ugly at times they were, and really just how up and down the numbers were, even from game to game, where there were, those flashes that we keep talking about and everybody clings to, and I think doing that allows you to look past some of the poor performances and things like that. So, I think this is a really big season. Obviously, he's really important for IU, but I think it's a big season for him, because I think if you get through another one and you don't see the growth that you're expecting, then that becomes concerning. But, if you want to take the optimistic viewpoint, I looked at the similar players on the KenPom for him. One of them is sophomore year Chris Chiozza, who really grew into a really, really good point guard for Florida over his last few years. So if he follows the trajectory of him, maybe that's where things go. And I think to a certain extent, he's additionally important because of Lander coming. And I know there's some questions about how much those two might play together and things like that. But I also think that Rob playing well allows Lander to do what he does best, but also get eased in a little bit. And so I think Rob being able to be healthy at the beginning of the season and kind of build some confidence becomes really important, because that always felt like the struggle last year, when just every time you felt like he was turning a corner from a health perspective, there'd be some minor setback. And that really seemed to kind of mess with his confidence, versus you throw in that Ohio State game. He got off to a really good start in that game, and that just kind of propelled both him and everybody through the rest of it. So if he can find ways to do that, then I think it's positive. But a lot on him, even as a junior, somewhat similar to a lot was really on him. He was a big factor in how IU was going to be last year as well. So kind of another season of the same in that regard.
Yeah, and look, it's hard to be a point guard at the college level. And that was the thing about looking at those Ken Pom, player comps, is a lot of those guys who maybe kind of struggled as, freshmen and sophomores, most of those guys that he was comped to turned out to be pretty good players as upperclassmen. Like you mentioned Shioza, there were other guys in there. But to me, and Coach mentioned in the chat, that, who knows how much he was even able to practice with some of those injuries. And that's fair, and so to me, kind of the three things that I think about for Rob for this year are health, rhythm, and role. Because if he's healthy, number one, that's just you're going to get the full guy, and maybe a little bit less willing to shy away from content and just feeling better about himself. If he can practice and play the full allotment of minutes, he can get into a rhythm. Because I think one thing we've learned about Rob over 2 seasons is he's a guy who, when he gets into a good rhythm, especially early into the game, he really seems to kind of lock in. And sometimes when he struggles early and it just doesn't kind of seem like he's got it, he struggles to get going a little bit. And so that rhythm will be important. And then I think role. I think he's got to be the guy, Scott, that you put the ball in his hands and you trust that he's going to go run the team. But the ironic thing is, the thing he has done the best over 2 years is catch and shoot 3-pointers. And he's not going to get those as much if he's constantly got to be the point guard with the ball in his hands. So he's going to get some because you dump it into Trace, you dump it into Joey, and they find him. But if he can spend a little bit of time playing off ball because you have Christian Lander coming in and pushing the pace, and those guys can play together, and he can step out on the wing, and have Lander create open shots for him, now I think you might find a nice balance where he can be your creator and be your main quarterback on offense, but still have some possessions where he can do the thing that he's the most comfortable doing, which is take those catch and shoot threes. And so I think if he's healthy, he'll get into a rhythm. And if you have that role where he can kind of do both things that you're asking him to do offensively, now you can unlock him offensively. And obviously from a defensive perspective, we know how important he can be there. So, look, I still cling to, to really optimistic feelings about him. I think he's still going to be a really good player as an upperclassman. There's just that wariness from seeing 2 full seasons of inconsistency on the court, which are difficult to shake. Even if you put it into the perspective of all the injuries, it's hard to shake what your eyes have seen, but I still feel like there's a really, really good path for him to have a good season as an upperclassman. Now, I know you took a look at this and you actually have an interesting player comp that you want to bring up. And Ryan's not here, so we can feel free to do player comps without being criticized. So,
eat on that, Ryan. I would say this too. I mean, I don't like on the surface, I feel like he's done well for 3-point shooting, but the numbers just don't bear it out. I mean, when I think of Jordan Hulls is a great 3-point shooter, never shot under 40% in his career at IU for a season.
No, very specifically on catch and shoot threes. That's what I'm saying.
Correct.
Like it's a very specific thing he's been good at.
Yeah. And that's the thing again too. Like Andy said, like as I started digging into this, like I was really surprised at just how bad the numbers look for him. Like just if you looked at just the statistical numbers, you'd be like, wow, why is this guy getting 20% of possessions? Like he shouldn't get any of it. So, but I was trying to find the comp of like, who's the IU point guard that you can comp Phinisee to try to kind of get some growth out of. And it's also kind of just a sad, like we haven't had a great lot of point guards lately. Like Yogi Ferrell's numbers were really good. Yogi does not comp with Rob very well at all. Eric Gordon is also an outlier out there. So the two that I looked at, which kind of surprised me too, Armand Bassett, you go back to him, but
that's who I thought.
Honestly,
that's where I thought you were going to go with it.
Honestly, his numbers, Bassett had better numbers. Like, I mean, this is where you got to start talking about the feel and like how the teams ran. Like we're two totally different teams, like that 07-08 IU team and this team now. So it's a harder comp. But honestly, like you go back and look at Bassett's numbers, like his offensive rating is better. He's taking about the same number of possessions. He's got a much better 3-point shooting percentage, much better 2-point shooting percentage, much better assist to turnover ratio. So I went a little deeper. I looked at Tom Coverdale, who still comps at James Harden, so can't use him. But I landed on, this may not be the best comp ever, but Robert Vaden. You look at Vaden's numbers, and Vaden was maybe more of a shooting guard than a point guard. But his numbers were right in that, 20% usage rate and offensive rating right around 96 and 101. He's shooting, 37, 38% from 3, 38 and then 46% from 2 his freshman, sophomore year. For him, if you use that as it's a tough comp because he went to UAB for the last 2 years. And so you have a transfer year in there. But if you look at him, his numbers kind of flatlined right after his sophomore year. But again, I think this is also personal. What one kid does is not what someone else does. Like, the way that Victor Oladipo worked is not the way someone else is going to work. And so, I'm also going to take the optimistic point because I've been here the last 2 years. I've seen him play. And when he is good, Phinisee is really, really good. And I also think a lot of his numbers, like he takes a lot of drives to the basket. If he could just finish a majority of layups that he wasn't hitting, that he wasn't finishing, I think those helps his numbers as well. And so I'm optimistic that he could definitely step it up. I kind of feel like the last 2 years, his numbers are lower than what he actually provided the team on the court.
Yeah. Vaden obviously was much more of a swing man than Rob, so that also makes that comp a little bit difficult. But, numbers wise, there's some similarities there. Andy, the other thing I wonder with Rob is, offensive efficiency numbers don't happen in a vacuum. And he hasn't exactly played on the most efficient offenses. And so a guy like Al Durham is able to have more efficient offensive numbers because he's using less possessions. He's really getting the ball in positions more to succeed, whereas Rob is kind of getting the ball and having to make things happen sometimes. And so, I think you have to put that number in perspective. And if the offense improves to the point that we think it will this year, Justin Smith, for all the things he brought, didn't bring a lot of floor spacing. There should be more floor spacing this year. And you've got a guy like Trace who's a year older. Everybody's got a little bit more continuity. There's some real offensive firepower coming in with the recruiting class. If Jerome Hunter's ready to step up, this has a chance to be a much better offense. And if it is, and if things are a little bit more wide open, for a guy like Rob who does have some wiggle and does have an instinct to get to the basket, that may open some things up more for him and help him play a little bit more the way he's comfortable. So when you talk about getting into a rhythm, it can be hard sometimes if your offense is a grind constantly and you're the point guard to constantly kind of be the one that's having to lead that grind. And I think we all feel like the offense is going to function a lot better and just make more sense this year. And I think it'll make Rob's numbers look better, whether he's playing better or not. But I think for a guy who really seems to like to get into a rhythm, I think that could have a real important impact for him.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a rising tide lifts all boats scenario a little bit there. With if you believe that the offense can have better spacing, can be a little bit more fluid, can potentially get more up tempo, then I don't think it's that hard to see him benefiting from that scenario. I think the other thing he potentially benefits from is during times when Lander can be out there as the playmaker, as you mentioned, Rob as a spot up shooter, as somebody who can do some damage there. That gives him a little bit of a break from handling the ball. So I think even having somebody else who may, push him for minutes or share, playing time with him from the point guard position may be a good thing for him in the long run as well, even though he's probably from a defensive standpoint, a guy who'd be out there at crunch time and some of those kinds of things. So I do think if the offense looks like we all kind of hope that it will and improves in the ways that it becomes likely to project that it will, with Justin being out and maybe being able to, you guys have talked a couple weeks ago about the options and what that might mean. I think when you look at it that way, then yeah, it could be he's surrounded with guys who maybe complement what he does well better.
Yeah. And look, and Indiana, Scott, just doesn't really have another option here. And this is why I think Rob gets talked about as the second most important player on the team. Again, Trace is number one. He's the sun around which, the whole thing orbits. But, you look at other guys, like, okay, if Jerome Hunter doesn't come through, all right, you play some more three-guard lineups. Maybe one of the freshmen needs to step up. You've got some ways around that. If Race Thompson struggles, all right, well, maybe you got to play Joey Brunk a little bit more. You can slide Jerome Hunter down. If Al Durham struggles, all right, well, you've got, Anthony Leal. You've got some other guys you can bring in. If Rob Phinisee struggles, what does this team do? Because you're not going to play Christian Lander starting point guard minutes as a 17-year-old, coming in. He's not going to be ready for that. Al and Armand are not starting point guards, and this is really the guy that you're giving the keys to your offense and spearheading your defense. And so that's why I think a lot is riding on Rob's shoulders this year, even though there's more depth in the backcourt and you've got a real balanced roster. That's why I really look at it as, Trace has to be Trace. He's got to get better. He's got to stay healthy, be that guy. But Rob is really the other guy where there's just not a great plan B if he isn't not only as good as he was next year, but takes the next step, into being a potential all Big Ten guy. So, I don't want to overrate it, but I really just don't see another great option if he isn't ready to give you 28 to 30 minutes of pretty high-level point guard play.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think Al Durham did a pretty good job of taking the ball when he had to last year. I think he stepped up, so I think he could be, a good serviceable backup. But I hear what you're saying. Like you need,
for like 5 minutes a game,
yes.
But not the whole game.
Yeah, and again, I think last year it was also a stark contrast when when Phinisee was in the game, you kind of had some semblance of offense, and then when Devontae Green was in the game, it's like, all right, it's Devontae time, and it's like, all right, can we get Rob back in because I'm tired of Devontae jacking up 30-footers.
Depends on which game. Depends on which game it was,
and depends on whether he made his last one. Like it depends on whether he's made 3 in a row or whether he's missed 3 in a row.
There were some games it's like, dude, just keep shooting, just keep going, whatever.
Yeah, just go for it, man. 50 foot, who cares? Knock yourself out, bro. This is also I hear what you're saying, just playing contrarian. I think this is also where if Armand Franklin could also be a little more consistent, it would help out. But I agree with you, and that's why again I go back to when you initially asked the question. My first thought was like, well, he's probably the second most important player, and even though the numbers don't bear it out, I still think that's there because in the end, someone's got to get the ball to Trace Jackson Davis in a good spot, and it's going to be Rob Phinisee more than likely. And that's something too we haven't talked about, but that's where another area I think that he needs to improve, and we need to improve as an offense is getting Trace the ball in more advantageous situations than where he's been getting the ball, or sometimes where he's trying to get the ball and just getting great position in the post, and we're not able to get him the inside post pass. So that's something the whole team has to work on, but especially Rob as the leader of the offense, he's got to be able to get the ball to Trace in places that are good for him.
And he's got to push the pace. I mean, we talk a lot and we, talk about how Archie's constantly like, waving his arm to move faster. And Andy, Rob has not been a guy through 2 seasons that has been real comfortable. It's felt like pushing the pace. He's done it at times and he's looked okay at times. The numbers aren't very good, and I don't think the eye test has been great. So I think that's really the next step for him. One of the next steps offensively is to get more comfortable. And in games where he does kind of get into that rhythm, he's good at it. But to really consistently be a guy who can push the pace, I think we all think that's what Christian Lander is going to bring. He's quick and aggressive. Like, you may have to try to rein him in a little bit. Clearly, Archie feels like he needs to push Rob to get going more. That, I think, if you're talking about what are you going to look for over the first 5 to 10 games of next season, one of the most important things I will look for is, does Rob look more comfortable pushing the pace? Is he leading Indiana to play faster? Because it really feels like something this roster is set up to do a little bit more, and it certainly is something that we know his coach wants him to do. So that would be a big thing to look for him in terms of kind of growth and evolution for next season.
Yeah, that's a tough one to really try to figure out the reason that he does seem less comfortable doing that. I don't know if it's a injury concern type thing of, wanting to really get going downhill in traffic and do something else. That may have nothing to do with it. I think the point guard role is such a challenging one. And that you talked about earlier, how difficult it was to play at the college level. I think these guys feel at some point you're the caretaker of the offense and you can't really you don't want to make a mistake. And sometimes that makes you play slower and doesn't necessarily even prevent the mistakes from happening. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if he was healthy enough for a long enough run where you could really see, is he embracing that part of it? As you said, Lander helps with that when he's in the game, but he's not going to be in the game all the time. So can you get Rob to feel comfortable making decisions in those scenarios? Because I would agree with what you said. There's been times that he's done okay at that, but there's also been times that some of that turnover rate that we talked about comes when he's getting himself sped up and trying to do things too fast. So yeah, that's a delicate balance and one of the hard things about playing point guard. But I think this team sets up well to need to play at a faster pace if they're not going to play, if they are going to play a little bit smaller, have some guys on the wing that can shoot. If you can push the ball up the floor, you're going to get open shots. So almost feels like he has to do that, or somebody has to figure out a way to do that, because that feels like the way this team can be most successful and kind of unlock that offensive potential that we talked about earlier, given what they can look like this year, maybe versus what they did a year ago.
All right, last question on this, or last comment on this. We do have some questions that we'll get to in the next segment. But Scott, obviously you look at a guy like Trace Jackson Davis, he's a source of optimism for the season. Jerome Hunter is a source of just boundless optimism. Do you look at Rob Phinisee for this upcoming season? Is he a source of optimism for you or more a source of concern about the upcoming season? Viscerally.
Optimism. I mean, I would say optimism because the thing that we've kind of always talked about this whole time is he hasn't had a full healthy season. Yeah. So all the things we've talked about, we haven't seen him play for 20 games where he's 100% healthy. And so to me, if you're going to take anything from this layoff and kind of time off, is hopefully it gave him time to get healthy, to get fully on the mend. Because I don't know all that happened, but it never felt like he got healthy from what happened his freshman year. Like it felt like it was just kind of this elongated, never getting healthy. And same thing with like Jerome Hunter's in the same boat. Like I'm excited for him because I feel like this is going to be the first year we're going to have like a fully healthy Jerome Hunter. And so I'm optimistic because the times where I feel like Rob was playing at 100%, he was a different player than we've seen, and the numbers bear out. Like the times he's been great. And so I'm going to be optimistic about it because everything else now kind of sucks. But also just because, again, some guys are just never healthy and it sucks. Like it's kind of the Maurice Creek thing, and I feel bad. But I really think that we can get a full year of healthy Rob Phinisee out of here. And I think if we do, and this is kind of the initial question you're going to, kind of going back to it, I don't see why he couldn't be, a top 2 or top 3 guard, point guard in the Big Ten. I'm not sure if he's going to be the number 1 or the first team all Big Ten, but I don't see why he couldn't be second or third team all Big Ten if he had a full healthy season. Just from what I remember seeing, what I see, the numbers don't bear it out again, but that's what I would say.
If he does that, we're going to be really good. I know that. I know that for a fact. Andy, to me, I have concerns, clearly, but he's still a source of optimism. For what you talked about, Scott, and what we talked about, where it's like it feels like there's a lot of untapped potential if he's healthy. And I'm going to believe that he's going to be healthy, and I think he can be a really good player when he's there. Where do you stand on it?
Yeah, probably in the middle. I think if you look back to how we felt his freshman year, I think you could see a steady build over the course of a 4-year career, and then you kind of looked ahead to like imagine what this guy's going to be like as a senior 4-year point guard and things like that. So I think, but that didn't really the first part of that trajectory didn't really happen this year. So I think it's fair to be less optimistic maybe than you were before. And I think the other thing with a guy like him versus a guy like Jerome, the ceiling of one versus the other is wildly different. To me. So I think that becomes a little bit hard. So I'm optimistic because I think there are reasons that he didn't kind of follow that trajectory as a sophomore. But I'm also a little bit concerned, as you said, because I feel like we came into last season a little bit the same way in terms of I'm not sure who the other guy is, so he better figure this out. And I think they may do as best they could in that scenario. But yeah, so I'm a little bit in the middle. You can still see the same guy that you were excited about as a freshman, but you also didn't see the growth. So I think it's fair to temper your optimism a little bit as you go forward to that. Not that he can't grow from a sophomore to a junior, but maybe he's not what you thought he would have been as a junior if he continued on the trajectory that you would have mapped out for him as a freshman.
That's fair. I mean, either way, it's definitely a prove it season for Rob. He is absolutely essential for this team reaching their potential, and hopefully he does, because if he does and if Trey stays healthy, then you've got a lot of pieces to fit around those guys that can make this a really, really good team, and I think that's why we're all really excited for the upcoming season. All right, coming up in our third segment, we are going to answer your questions. We've got a couple good ones about Rob Phinisee, so of course we'll hit those, and then we'll get to whatever else we have time for, including a fun one about IU alumni that Scott is over there furiously scribbling notes about. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Okay, so that was 46-31. Oh, wow, that was a long segment.
That was
holy smokes.
A Phinisee deep dive.
Dang, that went long. That might be a new record for segment, like 26 minutes.
A little bit
holy smokes.
I was surprised you kept asking stuff because I was like, I feel like we've been on this for a while, but
I didn't realize it was that long. Holy smokes.
And I'm not, and dude, I would normally blame myself for being long. Like that was not me. Like you did like a second round of questions. Like, all right, we'll keep going. Like,
well, I mean, I felt like there was still more meat on the bone, but I didn't quite think it was that long. But hey, that's all right. Okay. All right. Our first segment was short, so we're okay. We're doing okay on time. Here, Scott, why don't you take on the Ryan role and say something interesting while I do math? You have a fun story to regale the audience with, more player comps from the Mike Davis era that people can happily reflect on?
No, I don't. But I will. All right, I'll throw this out there for the chat mob. So this is completely unrelated to IU basketball, but I'm listening to the rewatchables with Back to the Future, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes,
watched it with my 7-year-old. But this would be a nitpick for me with Back to the Future. I love this movie, so I say it with all everything in my heart.
We can criticize the things we love. That's
Yes, I do that with my wife all the time. So the thing that with the movie that I've never understood is, so you have Marty McFly, who is playing the guitar. He's playing John, he plays Earth Angel. And during, nobody else really knows that he's evaporating into thin air. He's just playing. So if you're Chuck Berry or you're Marvin Berry, his nephew, or whatever, Chuck Berry's nephew, all you're seeing is a little white kid who came out to play guitar and doing a pretty bad job of it. Like, he's missing notes. He's like at one point sitting on the ground, like almost dying over the guitar, like doing a horrible job. And then the song ends. He kind of pops up. My first take would be like, all right, man, thanks. Get off the stage. Like, I'm not play another song, but not only does Marvin Berry let him play another song, he says, hey, why don't you lead the next song? And then you let this kid just say, all right, man, it's a B riff. You'll follow me for the changes. Like, the guys are like, all right, man, I'll be on there. And it's like, I would be like, no, dude, like, hey, get off the stage. Like, you almost just died next to the guitar. Like, I'm not letting you lead the next song on a B riff that just follow me for the changes. Like, dude, you can't even play 3 notes in a row. So that's what I was thinking about.
You just dribble the ball off your leg during the layup line. Would you like to be our starting point guard? That's basically what...
Thank you, Andy. That's a perfect analogy. So, I was thinking about that as I was listening to the rewatchables and Back to the Future.
I was not expecting a Back to the Future rant, but I'm happy that it happened. Although we do have some very concerned people in the chat mob about your recent comment. About your wife. Joel said Scott will be sleeping on the couch a lot. Jen says this will be Scott's last time on the assembly call. Enjoy him now. So,
why is that? Because you're kicking me off for Back to the Future talk?
No. About the comment about your wife.
Criticizing the things you love.
Yeah.
She's used to it. She wouldn't even listen to this. she'd be like, I mean, she's out there doing something else, just not paying any attention to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Scott and his internet friends talking IU basketball.
Like, seriously? It's May. It's June. What do you guys have to talk about?
She's like, have an break from you for a whole hour. Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah.
Maybe that's her take on it. Yeah. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can talk about whatever you want. I do not care at all. So, okay, that problem. The other problem too is when he has to hit 55 miles an hour when he hits the string to have the lightning come down, and then
88.
So if you're doing 88. Thank you. My God, 88. Yeah, wow, 88 miles an hour. You're doing that, like, you're not going to feather the gas when you hit 88. Like, you are on it, and you're probably going to hit 95 or so. The amount of space between where he hits the cord and the movie theater that he runs into is like maybe 250 yards, maybe 300 yards. So you're telling me that, like, if I'm driving that, and by the way, if I miss this, I'm stuck in 1955 forever. I'm flooring the gas until I know I'm in 1985. But I'm going to be able to now, on a DeLorean, like a POS car, hit the brakes, and it's going to have the stopping power to stop me from dying. On, like, that thing is crumpling up. You are getting sheet metal in the face. You are dying in a theater with the DeLorean in 1985.
Wow. Well, I'm just glad it worked out for Marty the way it did. Let's just put it that way.
Do you have time to do your math? There you go. This is I've at least covered
said,
for you.
Coach said too much math. Yeah. Okay. No, that was good though. That was good.
I love that movie, by the way. I love that movie.
Those movies are great. We do need to do a series on basketball movies and do some rewatchables.
Oh my
Hoosiers,
God! I mean,
Blue Chips,
obviously Hoosiers, Blue Chips.
It's Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the assembly call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks for tuning in tonight since Ryan's not here. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris. I'm here with Scott Caulfield from Crimson Cast and Andy Bottoms. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU News Roundup even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis whenever the games pick up again. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right. Time for the mailbag, gents. These questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community at assemblycall.com/community. We got a few on Rob Phinisee, so let's try and hit at least one of these from Anthony. He says, do you think we see a jump in scoring production for Rob Phinisee this year with the assumption of better health and having to handle the ball less, maybe sometimes playing as a 2 and looking for his shot more when Lander is in the lineup? Andy, how would you project that scoring-wise for Rob? He averaged what, like 8 or 7.6 last year, something like that.
That's what I was just looking up. You threw it to me too fast, though. I will say I heard Ethan Happ has signed up for one of those TBT teams, so we can all get our fill of watching him travel on post moves. Yeah, it's 7.3 points last year. I don't know that I see a huge increase. I think maybe the way those points come changes a little bit. Kind of like I said, I think he might be able to take advantage of some of his spot up shooting. But I don't know that he becomes a double-figure guy by any means. So if he gets to maybe 8 or 9 points a game, I think that's conceivable, but I don't think any kind of major jump is likely.
Yeah, Scott, what are you projecting scoring-wise for Rob? I think I'm pretty much where Andy is in terms of just the average.
Yeah, great radio. I agree with all you guys. No, it's about the same. I mean, I think he might be able to hit like 10 or so because he had a couple of games where he had like 0, 1, 2 points. Like he had a couple of pretty low scoring games. So I could see him being like around 10 or 11, but now we're splitting hairs between 8, 9, 10, and 11. So
from Justin, do you think Rob can make the All Big Ten defensive team if healthy? And it's always interesting how that stuff gets voted for because sometimes you need to have, big numbers in terms of steals or blocks or have some signature moments. And Rob does have, relatively good steal numbers. But Andy, what do you think? I certainly think he can be one of the Big Ten's 5 most impactful defensive players, given the role he's going to play for IU and what we've seen from him when healthy. That might not necessarily mean that he's an all Big Ten defender, though, based on how those things are selected.
Yeah, I mean, well, Xavier Simpson's not in the league, so that's one spot that opens itself up. So I guess maybe that's a positive. I think he could be. We all think back to the Michigan State game as a freshman, watching him guard Cassius Winston, and even some of the Michigan State game this year was the same way. You've seen him show flashes. I think it's just a consistency thing, which is what leads you to say, hey, he might not be an all first team guy just because we haven't been able to see it from a health perspective. But I think you've seen the skills are there, the instincts are there. So in that regard, I think it's possible, but it's maybe not likely just because it would require a level of consistency that we haven't been able to see from him so far.
And I think that's one of those things that if he is, it probably means we had a really good season. Because if Indiana's really good and kind of, surprises by not just being the 4th or 5th best team in the Big Ten, but contending for a Big Ten title, that's going to be one of the reasons, and people will pay attention to it. So I sure hope it happens because it'll mean good things.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I was going to say, those awards normally, especially for point guard, like your team probably has to be in the top 3 in the Big Ten. If you look at like the conference only defense for Indiana last year, we were 8th in the Big Ten. And normally you're just not, unless he had just some crazy gaudy number of steals, you're probably not going to give it to a team that's, playing on Wednesday in the Big Ten tournament, 8th in overall defense. It's just, unfortunately, there's not enough defensive stats like that. It's almost a team award.
Yeah. So it's unlikely. But he's shown the flashes, and if he does, it would definitely mean good things. Okay, Scott, this is from Ari. It says kind of a lighthearted topic, but he did Zoom chat this week with actor Jesse Eisenberg, who is an IU fan and lives in Bloomington. How many famous IU fans can you guys think of?
Yeah, this is a great, lighthearted, silly questions are things that right up my wheelhouse. I've always wondered why IU doesn't, and maybe he doesn't want to be promoted, but like having, Mellencamp and Meg Ryan at the games, or Meg Ryan when they were dating. I don't know if they still are. I haven't talked to John in a while about his love life.
We saw him at a game last year. She was not the person with him.
I know. I think they're done. R.I.P. Megan. But, Mellencamp is like, he's such a perfect, like he is so on IU brand. Like he's so, small town Midwest, Jack and Diane. Like I've always been surprised they haven't promoted that more. He's sitting right there on the court. But I would look at like Kevin Kline. I always wonder why they didn't, promote him more. I get why Cuban's not there. Jamie from Mythbusters, I like. But I would also too, I've often wondered why we don't seem to promote Isaiah Thomas more. Like it's just we have a lot of guys coming back, but like I never felt like there was a super tight connection between like Jordan and UNC is really tight, but I never feel like you have a ton of like IU and Isaiah connections out there.
Huh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, any others that come to mind for you, Andy? Obviously, it's great whenever you have a guy like Victor Oladipo who's there. He's probably like the top guy that you want to get sitting courtside right now. But 5 seconds left, Andy. Any good ones that you can think of?
No, I also
Putting
did
you on
look
the spot.
to self-edit myself. Xavier Simpson did not make first team All Big Ten last year, so there is not a spot open due to him. So
Well, there we go.
That's it.
I'll do
We're
that
done. No more
instead
questions.
because I would not be good at the famous alumni stuff.
Okay, well, that is going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thank you to Bob Thompson for producing a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then.
Take it from me, Roman Langford. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
I don't like carrots.
All right. Good stuff. So let's, do you guys have a few minutes to hit the rest of these questions?
I do.
Yes.
Okay.
I got to say, for those who are still listening, one of my favorite parts of the Crimson Cast takeover of Assembly Call Radio was Jared doing the outros for Galen and just the rhythm of speaking being so different and Galen just kind of going so long and then like the song just ending and him still talking was fantastic. Yeah.
I know. He's just so like laid back and, properly enunciating every word and doing those annoying Galen things that he does, Oh, gosh, that guy. Okay. There was another question from Anthony. So regarding Christian Lander and Rob Phinisee, he echoed something that we said at times last year. Rob struggled to push the pace up the floor as Archie wants. Do you think Lander will take more of the point guard role when both players are on the floor, since he seems to be more natural at pushing the pace? Andy, how do you think that'll play out?
I would say yes, because I think it plays to his strengths, gives Rob a little bit of a break, and also plays to one of Rob's strengths with the spot up shooting. So I'm inclined to say yes. I mean, to me, when Lander's out there, his key trait is playmaking, and that's the best way to get the most out of that key skill, in my view.
Scott, I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic because, Rob has been a guy. We talked about how some games it feels like he's not quite in a rhythm, and some games he's more confident than others. Like there's some games he's really, really take charge. And like he's a junior. The ball is his now. The team is his. And so, you wonder if he's going to feel that ownership of it, especially when they're on the court at the same time. And you got this young whippersnapper freshman who's 17, but, a jitterbug, a lightning bolt with the ball, has always been used to having it in his hands, is really aggressive. I wonder how that'll work. In an ideal situation, it'll be perfect. And whoever gets the ball, you go. The other one plays off the other guy. But, you just wonder what that chemistry will be like. And I think that's something that hopefully it'll evolve over the season and be really good. But I could see that being a little bit rocky early on as those two guys figure out how they fit playing together, while Lander is not just adjusting to playing with Rob, but also adjusting to playing with college basketball. That's going to be interesting, I think, how that works out with the two of them together.
Yes. I would never call you old, but you just in that question used whippersnapper and jitterbug in a sentence and a half. So, yes, old man Jared. No, I agree. I mean, I think this is something we also do in the summer, and I'm as guilty of as anybody else. Is like we just start plugging in freshmen. It's like, oh, well, Lander's going to take over the offense, and he's at least good for 12 points, and 5 rebounds, and he's going to be a great, point guard. It's like the kid's a freshman. The kid's and you brought it to it. Like, he's 17. Like it's very unusual for someone to come in like Trace Jackson Davis or Romeo Langford. Even we've had 5-stars that come in that like James Blackman Jr., who's a 5-star who comes in and isn't quite ready to take over as a freshman. Like that's really not the norm, and definitely not the norm of the Indiana players we've been getting the last 15 years or so. So, I think it's folly to say, oh, Lander's just going to plug right into the starting lineup. I think he's going to be a little bit hit or miss because all freshmen are. And so it is going to be Phinisee's team. And it is, he's a junior, and you really look at it like it's him and Al Durham. Like this is their team. Like Joey Bruggs to transfer. Race Thompson, was a red shirt, but he's not the kind of player who's going to be kind of leading this team. Like this is Rob Phinisee and Al Durham's team. Yeah. So he should be running the offense. He should kind of have a steady hand. And really, in my mind, one of the two of them should kind of be quote unquote running the offense basically 95% of the game. And so I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue because I think Lander will fit in there. And if Lander is just an absolute stud and ready to play 35 minutes a game in college, we'll find a place for him and that'll be all right. But this is still, you look at it, this is Rob and Al's team.
Yeah.
I don't go ahead.
No, Andy, go.
Yeah. I definitely don't see, again, I think if Lander ends up playing 30 plus minutes a game, it's because one of two things has happened. Either Rob is not playing well or Lander is out of sight. So
like out of sight, good.
Yeah. And so, out of sight. Now I'm saying like old saying. So we're just,
like really groovy, like far out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you've got.
I blame Scott for bringing up Back to the Future. He got us. He primed us to use these words. It's your fault.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
But
it's all part of my hypnotic act.
He's playing. But I think in general, I wouldn't anticipate that. We talked about what a challenge it is transitioning to playing point guard at that level, let alone when you should be a senior in high school. So I think Rob playing well becomes important early because it allows them to ease Lander in. If he doesn't play well, then maybe you're more apt to, give Lander a few minutes and see if you can get him up to speed and unlock what he can be as you go. So I think it's just another layer of how important Rob ends up being.
Yeah, I think when they're on the court together, definitely in transition, it's going to be whoever gets it go. I think just as we've talked about how Rob is a really good catch and shoot guy, Lander's a good shooter too. So they can both play off each other. I would think that, even when they're on the court together, especially early, it will default to Rob because it's his team, it's his ball, and I think Archie will be more comfortable with that. And then I think you'll probably see them run some sets for Lander, some stuff that he's good at, get him in a position that he's successful. Archie is still the Archie that we've seen, at least through 3 years, is a real control freak offensively. He just is. Now, part of that is probably because he hasn't had guys that he trusts to run the offense, and Rob now may be entering kind of this first time where he's had a guy for a few years, he's an upperclassman, maybe he takes the reins off a little bit, but I have a hard time believing that he'll do that with Lander, and that may help Lander some, put him in a position, or Lander could bristle against it. We'll see. But that would kind of be what I think. It's going to be interesting because I think when you start putting together, like, what's the ideal lineup for Indiana, those are two of your 5 most talented players, so you're going to want to get them on the court together if you can. So hopefully they can play well because I think Indiana's going to need them on the court together a lot this season. Patrick. Okay, I'd love to hear a discussion on how the assumed lack of fans in the stands would impact quality and competitiveness of gameplay. It's hard to visualize how games can be competitive without fans in the stands, kind of like my work presentations are flat because they're on Zoom versus in front of a group of people. God, that is so true, and I've heard a lot of athletes kind of wondering about that, And I think it'll be especially pronounced in a game like football, which is so emotional anyway, and physical, and you get there's so much adrenaline there. Not that there isn't in a game like basketball, but football is kind of that next level. But I think especially college basketball, where so much in the Big Ten especially is determined by who's at home and who's on the road, and a lot of that is just the fans and the comfort level. I think it's going to make a big difference depending on how many fans there are in the stands. But I think it'll be an adjustment, and probably after about a month, I think the players will adapt to it. But it'll be interesting to see once you get into Big Ten play, after you've had a month and a half or whatever of actual games, how that changes the dynamic of a conference that where who's on at home and who is on the road seems to make such a big impact. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the tale of two cities for IU, because in football, it's like we've kind of played in a lackluster. I mean, I'm a football season ticket holder. Those who know, I love football, but we're not the big house. We're not the horseshoe. We're not playing in front of 100,000. So, honestly, no offense to football, we could take the same 30,000 who show up and just, move them everyone move 5-6 seats. You could probably have the same number of people in Memorial Stadium, just spread out. But basketball, that is a real benefit that IU has, is playing in Assembly Hall. You see it in the record. It just, we're better at Assembly Hall. And so it's going to suck that we're going to lose that out. I think you're right. I mean, I think what's going to be interesting is, I think just next season is just going to be weird all around. I was talking to Galen about this, I think on one of our pods, maybe it was just off the pod too, but just, things are just going to look different. Like maybe in football, it's just Big Ten play. Like maybe there's no out of conference games. Maybe they decide to play a couple games in a couple different locations. Like same thing in basketball. Like maybe they just play Big Ten games. There are no non-conference. Like I do think the idea of like these, small schools that get paid to just go, around the circuit. Like, I don't know if that's going to happen. Like teams just traveling for 3 months getting paid. So I think there's going to be a lot of weird things for next year. And I think, unfortunately, it might be a neutral / positive for us in football and probably a negative for us, in basketball.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. Everybody's dealing with it. So it's not like there's just renovations to Assembly Hall and we're just not going to have, the same. It's everybody's dealing with it. So you could probably make an argument that like, oh, well, the more mature teams, the older teams will be able to handle it better, but maybe the younger guys won't be as intimidated. Like, I really have no idea who it would benefit and who it wouldn't. But it would seem like the teams that typically have the most pronounced home court advantage might be at a slight disadvantage without the fans there. Now, home court advantage is more than just the fans. It's also, your comfort level at your own gym and, different things like that. But it's really difficult for me to assess where the advantages would go, but it'll definitely be strange.
Here's the good thing for us is, if you're like my buddy Robert, who lives 3 doors down from me, he's a Michigan State fan. So like, he's obviously got a great, thing with basketball going right now. Let's just say they win the national title next year. Or like, let's just say there was a tournament this year, or I'm sorry. Like whoever wins the NBA title this year, you're going to have that weird, like, well, it's a bubble tournament. Like, it's going to be a weird asterisk. And if you're Michigan State, it's like you don't want to win an asterisk title. We're in a great spot, honestly, in football and basketball. Because if we, like, let's say somehow we win the Big Ten in football, like people could talk about asterisks all day long and be like, I don't care. Like, F you, I'm done. Like, fine, asterisk, give me 30 asterisks. Like, I don't care. And honestly, I'm kind of in the same way with basketball. Like, if we win the Big Ten in basketball, or we make it to like the Final Four, it's like, oh, that was a COVID year. It's like, I don't care. Like, do not care. I'll take a Big Ten title. Like, if this happened in 1993, you'd be a little bit more like, oh man, like it sucks. Like the Cheney team didn't get a chance to go for it that way. But oh, you're playing music under me.
Well, you start talking about the 90. You start talking about the 93 team.
Oh, sorry. I know, sorry. But so I think that's where we're in a great spot. Is that no matter what happens, if we are successful, you can slap all the asterisks on it you want. It's like, fine, I'll take a COVID Big Ten title in football and basketball.
I can't imagine on this college basketball season there will be an asterisk. I mean, everybody's going to play on whatever the rules are. It's going to be the same for everybody. If we get to a tournament, I can't imagine there would be an asterisk because it doesn't seem like there's going to be any benefit to anybody else. Like the NBA season is different because they played half the season. Now they're finishing it. I can't see an asterisk for basketball unless they end up having to do something really weird, like play NCAA tournament games at home arenas or something like that. But they wouldn't do that because that would be like, I don't know. Anyway, I struggle to see how there'd be an asterisk on a season that's beginning now where everybody's under the same rules. Besides, the Big Ten hasn't won a championship in like 3 decades. So to your point, we'll take an asterisk title. We don't care. So,
well, I'll take an IU title. I'm not ready to start handing out, Michigan State. Like, I care more about IU winning a title than the Big Ten winning a title.
No, but that's what I mean. Any team in the Big Ten, I think, would be like fine.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
agreed. Yeah,
except for
Northwestern,
because they can't even win. Yeah, Purdue can't even win asterisk titles, so they may as well just sit it out.
That was the other Ari answer that I was going to have for his question. Is like, I wish we had somebody who is in NASA, like just an IU grad. I'm sure there is, like an IU grad in NASA. Like, can we please just get them and just promote the living hell out of them and be like, yeah, like, maybe Neil Armstrong walked to the moon when he couldn't get there without Bob Schaefer. Like, Bob Schaefer's crunching those numbers, baby.
3 cheers for Bob Schaefer. We appreciate you, Bob. Bob Schaefer's the man. Okay, Patrick, when Archie was hired, he mentioned how much he admired the North Carolina program. For a North Carolina State grad to say that out loud was amazing. If you look at what Archie wants to do with pushing the ball, even on made shots, the amount of playing time he gives the bench, the focus on point guard play, it seems similar to what North Carolina does. Recruits like Trey Kaufman would fit perfectly at UNC. Do you agree with that observation, Andy? I don't agree with the observation that Trey Kaufman would fit perfectly at UNC. Trey Kaufman would fit perfectly at Indiana. He will be an awkward and incorrect fit anywhere else he may choose to go. That's my plug.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I do think you see some of it. I think you even see a little bit of it just with the, kind of continued emphasis on playing, bigger lineups. So that's something North Carolina has done even as college basketball has shifted away from that a little bit more, and some of it you could argue whether it's necessity or something else. So I never really thought of it that way, quite honestly, but it is an interesting theory, and you can see some of those parallels. But I don't know that if you think about some of the things they run with their secondary break and different things like that, like I don't think we've seen IU play at that kind of pacing necessarily, although maybe that's where he eventually wants to get, but we haven't seen it. Maybe it's building toward that, but I could see the point. I can see some of the parallels. I just don't know that we've quite moved the needle that far in that direction.
I'm going to have to get some more elite backcourt and wing talent to be able to play that way consistently. And as Brian says, does that mean our players don't have to go to class anymore? Clearly not, because our APR is going up.
APR numbers are too high. Also, that's another.
That's right.
Although perhaps Carolina's were relatively high as well, given that they were,
Oh, well, that's fair enough.
Who knows?
Fair enough. Scott, do you have any thoughts on the Indiana North Carolina comparison?
I mean, I wish we could be like North Carolina. Like it's it's funny as I used to do something on our webs back when Crimson Cast actually posted stuff on our website. But I used to do like an article every year, kind of breaking down the number, like the average number of Final Fours per year per program, and just how IU, like we just didn't stack, kind of being like the we're not elite kind of BS. But in breaking that down, like it's. To me, this comment is actually like it's less about. I get it, like Archie went to North Carolina State, but to me, it's kind of like the Yankees in basketball or the Patriots lately in football. It's like you look at North Carolina in basketball, and it's insane what they've done on an incredibly consistent basis. Like even Kansas has had just some major flameouts in the tournament. Like even Duke has had years where they're just not Duke. For the most part, over the last 30, 40 years, UNC has just been an effing juggernaut every single year. Going to the tournament, going to the Sweet 16, going to the Elite Eight. Like, they are probably the class of college basketball. Like, everyone thinks of Duke, but Duke's had more up and downs than even UNC. Like, UNC has just been so consistent. So to me, it's like it's the gold standard. Like, that's what I want to be.
Ironic coming off one of UNC's worst seasons ever, but
yes,
prior to last season, that was all very true.
After landing the top-rated recruit, and
yeah. Well, they're outliers for everybody, but that's what made last season so crazy for them. All right, well, Scott, thanks for doing this. We always appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. No, it's fun to do. We like having you on here. Andy, thank you for being here too, and thanks to everybody who watched live. So we appreciate you guys being here. We'll be here every Thursday. Next week, I'm assuming that we'll do the Race Thompson player preview. We were just going to wait for Ryan to be there, since he's the president of the fan club and all. Figured he should be here for Race Thompson. So the next shows Ryan is on, we'll do Race Thompson, and we'll just keep going through the player previews and keeping you updated on whatever else happens in the world of college basketball. All right, everybody. Take care. See you all next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Scott.
See you, Scott.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.